Thank you very much. Thank you for invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to be here in Wrocław. I'm going to talk about a topic which is much more specific and which is only indirectly connected with social democratic parties. I've called the issue, probably inaccurately, economic crisis and racism in the Czech Republic. I'm going to explain why it is probably an inaccurate name for what's going on in the Czech Republic. But still, the issue is connected with social democracy, even though indirectly. The point is that if this issue is going to grow bigger and bigger, more salient, the Czech social democracy is going to be the first and probably the biggest loser of this issue, becoming more and more salient. But I'm not going to focus in my short speech on this linkage between Czech social tensions, Czech racial and social tensions and social democracy, but rather on the roots and origins of this recent increase in tensions in the society. So basically it will be about growing tensions between so-called majority, in translation, white Czechs living proper lives, and so-called socially inadaptable minority, in translation, Roma people. Note please that the concept of socially inadaptable people is almost officially used in Czech public discourse by media, and it is considered to be a politically correct label or name. So it's going to be about this tension, which is unfortunately becoming more and more salient issue in, let's say, since 2006-2007. I'm going to focus on 4 main points within this issue. Firstly, to explain why the name of my contribution is probably inaccurate, I'm going to argue that it's the roots of this problem are basically social and not racial or ethnical. So these tensions are the primary social problem. Secondly, role of the neoliberal market orthodoxy both in political practice and as ideology in stirring up this tension and these conflicts. Thirdly, the political aspect of this and political mobilization of this bias of this issue. Which means rising interpenetration between extremist margins of Czech politics and Czech political mainstream, and risks resulting of this for future. The most recent example, the infamous Lex Řábková, a new legislative, recent legislative which could enable basically expelling people from local municipalities for very petty delinquencies, something that would bring Czech Republic back to the 19th century. And finally, the fourth point, the role of language, the role of political language in shaping the issue, how the issue is structured, how the groups in the issue are constituted, and how the cleavages are constructed. I've already partly touched on this by mentioning or by exposing the concept of socially unadaptable or inadaptable minority. So firstly, I'm not sure how much you are familiar with the general context or cultural historical background of the issue of coexistence between Roma minority and a non-Roma majority in the Czech Republic. I'll talk about it in a very big shortcut for time reasons and in order to get to the 4 points. Basically, I'm interpreting not only me, the topic is interpreted as a as a sort of path dependence, namely a vicious circle of bad education, inferior education, provided long-term perspective to Roma people. It was really a kind of official state policy to segregate them educationally. So it's a circle of inferior education, poverty, unemployment, social exclusion, and growing social isolation of Roma people. In this vicious circle, basically 3 different layers of discrimination are cross-cutting or meeting. Firstly, is the oldest layer of ethnic or racist prejudice and stereotypes, the image of nomadic gypsies who steal, who are dirty, who will never work, who will never study. Unfortunately, these stereotypes still work in the Czech society, and the Czech society is penetrated with these old stereotypes. Secondly, is the newer layer of the post-war problems, post-war heritage. By post-war, meaning the whole period of the non-democratic regime in Czechoslovakia, communist regime, which was typical for experimenting and social engineering with this community, policy of resettlement of formerly German regions after the expulsion of Germans from Czechoslovakia, where basically in several waves population from different parts of former Czechoslovakia was brought to the empty, depopulated areas, and there were different policies of experimenting, dispersing the people artificially, concentrating them artificially, employing them in heavy industry, and it is all connected with the policy of so-called special schools, which I've already mentioned, policy of educational segregation, basically the dividing line between special schools and so-called normal schools. I'm talking about fundamental, elementary schools, age 6 to say 15. Basically, the line of distinction was so-called normal kids on one side and mentally disabled plus Roma kids on the other hand. And there was some dependency even after the change of the regime. Well, the schools have been renamed, and it's not official state policy anymore, but still the practice of educational segregation continues in too much degree. And ironically, it's often motivated by the best motive. Local teachers motivated by who wish to help the families, to help the children, sometimes convince the families, saying, well, your kid will be better among your kids, it will be better for language, and this is how this practice of segregation goes on, despite all those criticisms from international and supranational levels and bodies. The third layer, to move on, I'm sorry, the third layer is the transformational heritage. It's no coincidence that the regions where Roma people live, where they are concentrated demographically, are also the same regions where the heavy industry was concentrated, and after 1990 this heavy industry collapsed. So the path dependency of poverty, unemployment, and social inclusion has fed up into these older layers. And not at least the invisible hand of market has been ruling mercilessly over this vicious circle and moving it faster and faster, which I'm going to mention in a few minutes. Before mentioning this, just a couple of words about the cultural context, where I can see one factor as absolutely crucial, and it's the character of Czech society. Czech society which is particularly vulnerable particularly vulnerable to problems of xenophobia and let's say, intolerance. Czech society as artificially homogeneous, which historically has lost all minorities, all groups who lived in the territory with Czechs, Czech-speaking Czechs. So there's a problem of so-called, what I call problem of residual unity. That Czechs used to be just one among many ethnic religious groups, and in the 19th century, as a part of the politics of national revival, the cleavages between these groups were becoming quite sharp, and the result of this was kind of sectarian mentality, which has survived, which has pertained in the Czech homogeneous society. It is quite notable here in Wrocław. Wrocław is at first sight quite cosmopolitan, open city. At least the impact on me is such, and this is what you won't find so easily in the Czech Republic. Obviously, Prague is a cosmopolitan city too, but the cosmopolitanism is much more artificial. It seems to be much more commercial, much more touristic. Here, at least for me, it seems something much more authentic and homegrown. So this is the background. Now, what's happening now? How has this changed with the economic crisis? Firstly, economic crisis has opened it has opened a Pandora's box of problems that have been unresolved for decades, and it has disclosed the problem of growing ghettos of social exclusion. This is probably the first problem. That over decades, the number of socially excluded areas and communities has been growing. But before the crisis, this was kind of invisible, or consequences of this problem were absolutely neglected and underestimated. It was only after the period when the growing frustration in society as a whole has shown this problem in its full seriousness. As a part of this is a growing generational gap within the Roma community. You may call it one community. In fact, it's a very heterogeneous group, but let's, in a shortcut, let's say community. So growing generational gap when the families that have already been integrated are suddenly excluded again by the majority as a result of the experience with the rising problem with the younger generations that are falling more and more in the trap of socially pathologic phenomena such as gambling, drugs, prostitution, crime, and others. So here you can see the problem of invisible hand of market for the first time. As you probably know, the lack of regulation of gambling industry in the Czech Republic. We've become famous, or probably infamous, as a gambling room of Europe. So one of the consequences of this in structurally underdeveloped regions and economically weak regions is obviously that it leads to conflicts and to tensions and even to violence. Another area in which the neoliberal orthodoxy as political practice is feeding into this problem are the local deals between local entrepreneurs who are providing accommodation and who are in fact inviting socially weak weak groups, mainly Roma people, and who are in fact contributing much to the accumulation and concentration of the socially excluded areas. These accommodation providers, these agents, often get the money directly from state because the social benefits on housing can go directly to these entrepreneurs and the people in question, that is, the people who should receive these benefits, are bypassed. A similar program with various voucher systems is another typical story in socially excluded areas. So we can see social exclusion as good business, where local estates often struck deals with local politicians, and also local leaders who misuse or abuse the situation and mobilize the conflicts in such a way that they mobilize the majority population against the Roma people. We can come back to this in discussion. Maybe you heard about Varnsdorf, Northern Bohemia crisis last summer, when it was exactly this example of a local leader. I call them outsider leaders because it's not really political leaders, but people who really get visible as a consequence of this conflict. People like Lukáš Kohout, absolutely unknown person who became a local spokesman for the frustrated majority in a small town of Varnsdorf. By the way, a man who was a notorious cheater, and who, as far as I know, was even sentenced for cheating. I think he was even participating in foreign or traveling at the expense of the Czech Republic, of the state, pretending to be a member of delegations. So these people also participate in mobilization of these tensions. So through this, I'm already coming to my points. I've already mentioned two areas where the role of a market orthodoxy or neoliberalism has been feeding into deepening this problem. One example one aspect that concerns neoliberalism as ideology. An interesting phenomenon is that Roma minority is becoming a kind of transmission belt for selling the message in the Czech Republic that social benefits, that social welfare system is something that is especially for minorities who misuse things. So social welfare is not a good, a universal good, which is generally good for the society, but it's something that distinct minorities can abuse. And Roma issue is often used as an example for this story. The role of political language and the role of media. I've already mentioned the concept of socially inadaptable minority, which is, as I said, quite frequently and normally used by Czech media. And even if the media want, probably in good motivation, even if they want to show some positive examples, they are completely naively staying in this framework of proper majority versus inadaptable minority. And if they are showing a positive example, let's say, of a local Roma family who has integrated into society, whose kids go to school, people who work, etc., etc. They are framing it and shaping it as a kind of exception from this majority versus minority structure. So there's, without much exaggeration, we can see that in contemporary Czech Republic, a wave of anti-Gypsyism, Gypsy as the old traditional name for Roma people, anti-Gypsyism is spreading, and it's also, I've also read some articles on these issues, so it's quite openly described as such, as issue of problem of anti-Gypsyism, which can become one of the mobilizers of social hatred and social vengeance conflicts. Obviously, all this doesn't mean that I want to oversimplify the story, implying that Roma people are only the victims. Obviously, some of them have also been the attackers. This is actually how the recent problems have started. That usually a group of youngsters attacked a group of other youngsters, and these events have led to a chain of events, usually protest groups, protests, marches by local people were shocked by the brutality of the attacks. And typically, as I said, the outsider leaders entered the game and actively mobilized this wave of shock and anger by local population. One of the last points, and now I'm coming to the last point, the political aspect, is the political parties and political groups. So-called Workers' Party was established in 2006 in the Czech Republic, an extremist neo-Nazi group, which was established at two attempts, because firstly it was banished by the court. Then it was established again. It was renamed. It was established under another name, so-called Workers' Party of Social Justice. Interestingly, this party wasn't successful at their first attempts to mobilize racial hatred in Czech society. Their strategy was organizing protest marches in so-called problematic regions, especially in the cities of northern Bohemia and northern Moravia. The effects of their attempts have been at least ambiguous, because in some cases even the local citizens didn't welcome the initiatives of the Workers' Party. But this was before the crisis and before the recent increase in violence and in tensions. After that, we can see how the Workers' Party of Social Justice has penetrated more and more into the, let's say, local grassroots movement against Roma, because it is really a movement against Roma. The people who protest and march in cities are shouting out anti-Roma slogans such as "Roma go to work." Obviously they would wish to. The problem is almost 100% unemployment in this group. And not only the penetration of Workers' Party into the local initiatives, but also, as I said, the more and more unclear boundary between mainstream politics, mainstream political parties, and the extremist racist settings. It's not usually the leaders or leaderships of the mainstream political parties who participate in this racial hatred, but it's usually sub-leaders or local leaders. And I'll mention just two examples. Former chairman of People's Party, Jiří, who became well-known and popular, I can say popular, as a result of his initiative of moving local Roma people from the center of his town of Vsetín to the periphery, and some of those people were even moved to very remote regions of Moravia and Bohemia. And another example, Ivana Řábková, former mayor of the city of Chomutov in northern Bohemia, who has been one of the proposers of this infamous legislative, which is now a completely fresh issue, and which is probably anti-constitutional, and we will see how this issue will finally come out. So to summarize the issue, Czech society as a vulnerable society to xenophobia and social xenophobia could easily become a setting for mobilizing racist and hatred messages, and neoliberalism is one of the crucial contributing aspects